Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Rowe. Today we're looking at Intermediate Algebra Part B. This is Lesson 11, bottoms up. In this lesson, you have to simplify some rational expressions showing all your work. Now, a lot of you are turning in answers with no work. So I'm going to show you exactly what I expect to see on each problem. So there's no mistaking what you have to do. So let's get started. So here is an example like numbers 1 and 2. Numbers 1 and 2 is just a simple rational or fraction, basically, and you're asked to simplify it. And it says to show steps as indicated in the lesson content and the live recording. Well, giving me just an answer is not showing your work. So let's look at how we're going to show our work. What we're doing here is we're reducing this fraction to its lowest term is basically what we're doing. So we're looking for common factors in the numerator and denominator that divide out so that I can reduce. So if I look at 720 and I look at 80, they have lots of things in common. They're both divisible by 10. And 72 and 8 goes into 72, so they're both divisible by 8. So really and truthfully, they're both divisible by 80. So I can divide the numerator and denominator by 80. And so this is what you need to show me. You need to show me what you're doing. Divided by 80. And so if you look, 720 divided by 80 is 9. 80W divided by 80. 80 divided by 80 is 1, so it's W. So that's how you're going to show your work on numbers 1 and 2. And they're real similar. Number 1 is just numbers. Number 2 has the variable. But that's basically what you got to do. Now, on number 2, you got to also state what the domain would be. So now the domain is limited by anything that will make the denominator equal 0. So in this case, our domain, which is something you have to put in here, please put in the domain, W cannot equal 0. So there you go. That's like numbers 1 and 2. All right, here's one like number 3 and 4. Similar kind of problems to the 3 and 4 that's in the actual lesson. I went more closer to number 4 than number 3, but they're basically the same type of problem. Again, you're going to simplify, showing all your steps, and you're also going to state the domain. Now, start the problem off with the domain, get that out of the way. So if I'm looking right here, my domain for this problem, remember I said that the domain is limited by anything that would allow a denominator to equal 0. Well, if I look here and here, I can't allow x or y to equal 0 because that would give me a 0 in the denominator. So my domain, and I'm going to put it down here, is that x cannot equal 0 and y cannot equal 0. So the domain's done. Domain's the easy part. Don't skip that part. Don't skip the easy part. All right, so now let's get to work here on the rest of this. What do I do now? Well, I'm going to look for things that I can actually reduce across the diagonals and up and down. I'm going to look to cross cancel where I can. So first thing I notice right here is that 14 and 7 are divisible. 7 goes into 14, 2 times. So I can cross out the 7, leaving a 1, and 14 divided by 7 is 2. I can also do this the other direction. The 9 goes into the 18 2 times, and so that's going to leave a 1 there. Now, don't get too confused with what you're doing. Take things one step at a time, make life a lot easier. So what I've got left right now, just after I've done that one step, is 2y cubed over x times 2 over 1, or 2 over just y squared. I'm not going to, that's 2x on top right there. So now what else will cancel out? Well, I've got some other things that's going to cancel out. So if I look right here, I have x's in common on the diagonal going from bottom to top, left to right. So now if I look right here, I can cancel that x with that x. So those are gone. Now I look at the y's. I've got 3 y's because it has an exponent of 3. That means there are 3 y's right there. This one has 2 y's. So that means that there's 2 y's in common that will cancel out. So I can basically cross this y out. Let me change the color. Cross this y out. And that's going to leave me with a single y right there. So now I've canceled out everything that's going to cancel out. Now all I got to do is write my answer. So my answer here on the top, I've got 2 times 2, which is 4. And then I have a y to the first power. And what's up on the bottom? Well, everything canceled out. So when everything cancels out, there are 1's left. So 1 times 1 is 1. I don't need to put over 1. So 4y is my final answer. My domain is all values as long as x does not equal 0 and y does not equal 0. So that's how you do number 3 and 4. Let's take a look at number 5. This is just like number 5. And I kind of got a little more specific on these next ones because the problems are a little bit different, but this is still a reducing a rational expression, simplifying a rational expression problem. You still have to state the domain. Now, the domain in this case, again, I'm looking only at denominators at the start. Look right there. I've got x plus 3. Well, when is that going to equal 0? That's going to equal 0 when x is negative 3. So my domain, real simple. X cannot equal negative 3. Please state the domain. That's the easy part. All right, so let's get started on simplifying. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for things that cancel, things that reduce. So if I start off this problem the way it sits, without doing any kind of factoring or anything, I can see right here that 4 divided by 4 is 1 and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down to the next step, and I'm going to do something to this particular binomial. Remember, binomial is just an expression with 2 parts. So I've got 2x left in the numerator of the first fraction over x plus 3. And the second fraction in the numerator on the top, I can factor a 3 out right there because both of these terms are divisible by 3. So I'm left with x plus 3. And then on the bottom, I've got a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put that 1 there. That way I have 2 fractions. So now I can cross cancel some more stuff. Look at this. That factoring that out, look at that. That helped me cancel this out. And again, this is showing your work. This is what I need to see. I need to see each step of the process and what you're doing. And so all I've got left here, that's a 1, is I've got on the top in the numerator, so I've got 2x times 3. Well, that is 6x. And on the bottom in the denominators, I've got 1 times 1, which is 1. Don't need to put the 1. So there's my final answer. And there's my domain. Please don't forget your domain. So that's how you do number 5. All right, number 6. This is our first division problem. So this is a division problem with monomial expressions, not binomials. So first thing I need to do is anytime you have division, you change division to multiplication by multiplying by a reciprocal. The little thing that I was always taught, which is in some circles frowned upon now, is keep, change, flip. Or as my calculus teacher used to say, never mind the reason why, just invert and multiply. So that's what we're doing right here. I'm going to keep, change, flip. Never mind the reason why, just invert and multiply. So I inverted the second fraction and multiply. So now I'm going to look for things that cancel, just like we did in the other problems. Well, look at this. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Negative 4 divided by 4 is negative 1. I can also cancel out the 5s right here. And I forgot to do domain. I didn't forget it. I'm going to go back and do it in just a second right here. So we've got 5 divided by 5 is 1. On the denominator on the other side, 15 divided by 5 is 3. And so I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and do my domain. The domain, I'm looking at this right here is going to help me get my domain. That's where I'm going to get a 0 in the denominator in this problem. So the domain for this one will be x cannot equal 0. Because if I get 0 right there, then everything cancels out. All right, so now I've done a couple things right here. So I'm going to write this down, what's left in the first fraction. The 5 canceled out, so there's a 1 there. The xy I haven't done anything with yet, so I've got xy over, and I've got a 1 in the denominator right there. The second fraction, the negative 4, became a negative 1, and in the denominator, I've got 3 times x squared. All right, well, the only thing left to do here is to look at the variables. Well, the variables, some of it will cancel out. If we look right here, we've got an x right here. How many x's? 1x, because if it doesn't have an exponent, we assume it to be a 1. Every other exponent is written. So I've got 1 there. I've got 2 here because that exponent is a 2. So that's going to become a 1. And then this variable is going to cancel itself out. And so that's going to leave me with my final fraction, which I'm going to get by multiplying left to right. Y times negative 1 is negative y. That's the numerator. In the denominator, I've got 1 times 3x. So that's 3x. And again, the domain is x cannot equal 0. The simplified fraction is negative y over 3x. And again, showing all your work. Please show all your work. If you're having trouble typing it in, you got something somewhere you can either take a picture or scan. Take a picture, scan it, put it in a doc, attach the files. I'll accept it that way. Just get me your work somehow. In Google Docs, you've got access to Google Docs. You can write equations and put them in there. All right, so this is like number 7. Only got 2 more. I know this is going a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I'm trying to explain. I want everybody to see what you got to do. All right, so again, this is the division. So just like the last one, we're going to keep, change, flip. Never mind the reason why, just invert and multiply. So keep, change division to multiplication, and flip. Now, how do I flip this? Well, I assume that there's a 1 right there. So I'm going to flip it and become 1 over x squared plus 6x. Okay, the domain. This is where we get the domain from this particular point. So I'm going to look at this second fraction and its denominator right here. That's where I'm going to get my domain from. That's going to factor into x times x plus 6. I factored a common x out. So there's 2 things that's going to make this equal 0. If x is 0, it's no good because I can't have x is 0. If I look at the second factor, if x is -6, I'm going to get 0 right there. So -6 is a no-go. So the domain is x cannot equal 0 or -6. Everything else is good. So again, don't forget the domain. That's kind of the easy part of this. So now this right here, that kind of helps me do my simplification. I'm going to rewrite the fraction x plus 6 over 7 times 1 over, and then we got x times x plus 6. A couple things are actually just one thing is going to cancel out here. That x plus 6 is going to cancel out with that x plus 6. And what's my final answer, folks? I've got 1 on top. 1 times 1 is 1. That's the numerator. And in the denominators, I've got a 7 right here, and I've got an x right here, so that's 7x. So 1 over 7x is my final simplified fraction. And my domain, don't forget the domain, x cannot equal 0 or -6. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, our final example. I know you're excited. So here we go. This is just like number 8. Similar to the others. So division, keep, change, flip. I'm going to go ahead and do some steps just to save some space here while we're going. This is a difference of squares. We talked about difference of squares earlier in intermediate algebra. If you don't remember, go back and review those lessons on how to factor a difference of squares. Both terms are perfect squares. X squared is a perfect square, and so is 9. So it factors into x minus 3, x plus 3. Again, if you don't remember that, go back and review those lessons, the lessons on factoring. And I'm going to change to multiplication. I'm going to flip my second fraction. That's 12x cubed over x plus 3. Now I'm going to look to get my domain. This is where I'm going to get my domain. I'm going to look at this fraction, and I'm going to look at this fraction, and that denominator right there. What's going to make the denominator on the left equal 0? When x is 0. So my domain, x cannot equal 0. And if we look at the second fraction, what's going to make that equal 0? Well, if x is -3, -3 plus 3 is 0. That's not going to work. So -3 can't be it. So there's your domain. Domain's done. And now we're going to look to simplify. So what simplifies here, Mr. Rowe? Well, let me tell you. This x plus 3 is going to cancel out with that x plus 3. Look, gone, done. So let's look at the other side. Right here. This 3, if I divide it by 12, is 4. And again, we've been talking about this the whole little time here. That X is like a 1, so that means there's one X right there. And let me change colors. There's 3 X's right here. So one of these X's will cancel out with one of these X's, leaving 2 X's right there. So everything, it looks like everything in the denominators canceled out. So all we've got left is stuff in the numerator. So let's go ahead and get our final answer here. On the top in the numerators, looks like I've got a 4. I like to put my numbers down first. Coefficients always go first. Then I want to put my single variables next. So I've got x squared. And then I want to put any binomials. Well, the binomial I have is x minus 3. So look at that, ladies and gentlemen. That is your final answer. So I hope this helps you with showing your work in lesson 11. This is, what's the name? Bottoms up. If you are still struggling, if you still do not understand what you need to do, a lot of you are getting these answers just not showing your work. If you don't know how to show your work, send me a teacher message. Better yet, make an appointment during office hours. So let me know if I can help you.